Welcome to the second half as the Atlanta Braves are feeling and hoping that their best baseball is yet to come. And we're now in the process of finding out just what that will look like. The All-Star break is come and gone. The trade deadline grows closer by the day, and we've got a lot to get into on today's episode. I'm Grant McCauley. He's Chris Willis. This is Battery Power TV. Before we get into all this good stuff, hit that thumbs up button right below the video. Leave us a like on this episode. Make sure you're subscribed and turn on those notifications so you know every time we drop a new episode of BPTV. And for goodness sakes, please tell a friend. We appreciate that as well. Chris, we saw four Braves head to the All-Star game while the rest of the team hopefully got some time to rest and recharge. And we've been all over the first half and how things started. But what really matters is what the Braves are about to do as they look to put all of that behind them, put everything together for a stretch drive that they're hoping will take them deep into October.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good refresh for everybody. I think it's a long season, obviously, but now you're almost to that 2 month sprint. So I mean, it's go time. We've seen the Braves kind of so slow play some things, and I think they'll still continue to do that with the rotation. But at the same time, I think it's about getting themselves right, getting healthy, and trying to make some noise in the postseason.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up healthy. We're going to get into that quite a bit, but obviously production is going to be key, especially for the offense, which again, we're going to get into momentarily. And we're all kind of waiting to see the ways that the Braves are able to improve. And it's pretty obvious that there has been some underperformance in the first half, plenty of injuries mixed in, particularly on that offensive side, which has compounded things and made it even more difficult for the Braves to get things truly back on track. One guy the Braves need to get back in there and are hoping to welcome back sooner than later. Well, that's center fielder Michael Harris II, who's missed just over a month now with his grade 2 hamstring strain. I talked to him just before the All-Star break on that final homestand. It sounded like things were going great, perhaps on the mend even quicker than he thought was possible. Sprinting was the next step for him. Then I'd imagine we're going to get some clarity on how that went in the form of a rehab assignment if truly everything went according to plan.
Yeah, and I mean, it's gonna be huge to get him back. I know when that injury happened, I think Snit just wouldn't even put a timeline on it. So, you were wondering, early August, end of August, you just never know about those things. So the fact that he's, been running, progressing, I wouldn't be shocked as long as there's not been a setback. I wouldn't be shocked if he's not on a rehab assignment soon. And, hopefully you're getting him back right around the end of the month, right after the trade deadline, because I mean Jerry Kelenick's done a great job in center field, but getting Harris back and hopefully getting him going, it could just jumpstart the whole lineup.
Yeah, it's one of the keys to having things the way that you need to have for clarity's sake, obviously, for production's sake. And also, and when I say clarity, I mean, what do you truly need to go out and get? What could make this club better? What is Alex Anthopoulos going to do? And how is he going to identify those needs and maybe figure out what exactly is the best move that this club can make to bring in some help? I think we know outfield is going to be on that list, but some food for thought regarding Harris for those wondering if he is going to be able to impact things the way you just mentioned, Chris. Number one, I don't know why you'd wonder that because he's been outstanding in each of his first two seasons. But how about this? Harris missed time with that back issue, was batting just 163 through 38 games played a week into June last year. He proceeded to bat 335 with a 900 plus OPS over the final 100 games. I'd say he figured it out this year. Harris batting 250 with just over a 650 OPS through 67 games. He'll have a couple of months to find his rhythm, but an encore, Chris, of that 2023 surge would be a very welcome development for a Braves lineup that, as we've talked about time and again, could use all the help and all the firepower it can get.
Yeah, I mean, now's the time for that too. I mean, they really need that version of Michael Harris, down the stretch here because, you without Ronald, and some of the other guys struggling, you need all your guys to step up at this point, and it's go time. But anytime if you can bring Harris back, put him in center, get him in that lineup, that slides Jerry Kelenic to a corner. I mean, you just make yourself better because I mean, that's just one of those type of guys that you just can't replace.
Yeah, offensively, he can do some things for you. Defensively, obviously, Michael Harris brings a ton of value there. And while Jared Kelenic has played a very nice center field, I think just having Jared get those everyday at-bats, regardless of the defensive position, that's what's going to help him find some of the consistency and some of the results that he has found to close out the second half. I know it was a little bit of a downswing for him heading into the All-Star break, but I think you have to be pretty pleased about Jared Kelenic since his move to being a full-time player. And unfortunately, that came because of the absence of Michael Harris and also the absence of Ronald Acuna Jr., who sometimes it feels like we could go an episode without mentioning him, but it's in the backdrop of everything that the Braves are dealing with. They also don't have the National League's MVP. Now, last week we kicked the can down the road on trade talks, but now that we're less than 2 weeks away from the trade deadline, it seems pretty obvious to start cranking up the volume here on those. Alex Anthopoulos is no doubt trying to find the right pieces to add. Is that impact player in the outfield? Is it someone to bolster the rotation? Is it something different off the board altogether? We're about to find out, Chris.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think just personally, I think it's a hitter, and I mean, to me, it looks like outfield's probably the easiest place to plug that in. But I think they really need to jumpstart this offense. So I know people. I think the Braves love Orlando Arcia. I think they love the defense that he brings. But that's another area that you could jumpstart the offense. If you could make that's probably a bigger impact trade than what I'm kind of anticipating. But he's shown us in the past, though, you can't discount anything
No.
at this point when we get to this point of the season, as far as trades go. So I'm really interested to see how they do it. I think it's a hitter. I think it probably ends up in a corner outfield situation, but you can't close the doors on anything really.
And that's kind of Alex Anthopoulos' MO. You don't necessarily know who it's going to be, when it's going to be, and what it's going to take to get a trade done. But more times than not, he finds a way to improve this club. Now, let's stick a pin in trades for just a moment because amidst all the All-Star happenings this past week, a little thing called the MLB Draft, and that took place and saw the Braves once again go pitching heavy with their draft class, led by their top pick at number 24 overall, Cam Caminiti. If you know the name, it's because you've been a baseball fan for a while. Now, I know MLB wanted to shine a brighter light on the draft, and thus they moved it to the All-Star Week festivities. But outside of guys like Paul Skeens, we aren't really seeing the vast majority of these players in the big leagues for a while, if ever, in some cases, depending on how far down you go. All of that aside, though, the Braves getting Caminiti, that's an exciting prep arm. And it sounds like, Chris, that they were thrilled to see that he was available to them at number 24.
Yeah, they tried to. I think they talked a little bit and tried to downplay that a little bit. But if you were reading any of the stuff in the lead up to the draft, most people thought he would be off the board way before the Braves picked at number 24. So, I thought it was a great pick. I wasn't exactly looking high school arm for them in that slot, but I mean, I don't think you could. I don't think you could really pass on a guy like Caminiti. I mean, this guy with a 97-mile-an-hour fastball, he's 17 years old, reclassified to this year's draft, might have been a top 5 talent had he stayed in school and submitted for the draft next year. So, I think it's real high upside. We know all the caveats with high school arms, but I think if you're going to gamble on one, you gamble on one that's got this kind of stuff. And he's got the good fastball and he's got the secondaries to go with it. So really excited to see him get started and see what he looks like.
Yeah, and we'll see and track, of course, the rest of these Braves draft picks. And the best way to do that, of course, is to head on over to batterypowered.com. You get all the recaps, insights, check out all the coverage they've got. It's truly a one-stop shop. It's definitely a learning opportunity if you're into trying to figure out what the Braves did in this draft class. Chris, I know you guys were working as hard as ever to make that happen here this year.
Yeah, I mean it's something that we've been doing at the site for a long time. Garrett and the whole minor league crew really go above and beyond. We got a signing tracker up right now. The Braves have been signing these guys. They haven't announced anything officially, but I think most of this class is already signed, and there's not a whole lot of question marks left. But you can find all that stuff, including the undrafted signings that are happening, and we've got it all there in one place.
All right. Be sure to check that out again, batterypowered.com. Let's segue from the draft right back into trade speculation because I think we can kind of connect these two again. It's the time of year that clubs are restocking their farm system. The Braves have done that, I think, pretty well with young arms, especially in recent years. They've had themselves some solid trade chips to utilize from these recent drafts, and teams are always going to be looking for pitching. And we've already seen some of these pitching prospects end up in some important trades over recent years. So I'm not saying it's the 2024 draft class, but Chris, I think even if the Braves don't find themselves with one of the annually top-rated farm systems in all of baseball, there's a little bit more there than I think people realize.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, you have to really understand the prospect evaluation thing. I think the Braves really keep everything close to their chest when it comes to their prospects. I think they probably value their system a little bit more than some of the national, outlets actually do. But I mean, it hasn't prevented them from going out and making trades. I mean, they've brought in. You just look at some of the guys they've brought in, some of the trade deadlines that Alex has had. I mean, I don't think there's other than 2020. I don't think there's ever been a situation where they haven't been able to make a deal if they needed to.
Yeah, I mean, in 2020 obviously was its own kind of time in the world there, and the Braves, despite all of that, managed to get within one win of the World Series that year. But putting that aside, they're not all going to be 2021 in terms of pulling off a whole bunch of trades that are going to impact you immediately and perhaps endlessly in the hearts and minds of many Braves fans if you win the World Series. But putting that aside, there have been a lot of deals that have been done that have brought over the likes of Sean Murphy, Matt Olson, Chris Sale, we saw over the week or over the winter. We saw Jared Kelnick come over, and the Braves have still debuted players like Michael Harris and Spencer Strider in the mid. Spencer Schwellenbach now, I think we could probably throw his name on the list. They've been able to bring up talent throughout this as well, and it looks like, in large part, kind of hold on to the right guys. Of course, you're not going to win every trade, but we'll see how this trade deadline plays out. A couple of odds and ends for the Braves as we get ready to preview the series against the Cardinals this weekend at Truist Park. Veteran utility man Brian Anderson opted not to report to AAA. Gwinnett will instead become a free agent. Brian Anderson, we barely knew ye, but good luck with whatever's next for him. And who knows, if he doesn't find something to his liking, maybe that road will lead back to Atlanta through, of course, Gwinnett. Elsewhere, Ian Anderson continued his rehab with Rome on July the 12th. He tossed 4 1/3 innings of 2-run ball on 60 pitches. Good to see that pitch count climbing. A.J. Smith-Shawver, who was optioned back to the minors, will continue to stretch himself out to start again. Chris, those are a couple of arms that could have a part to play in the rotation plans for the second half, particularly if Atlanta wants to continue to try to stretch things out a little bit and stay away from certain guys, give them a little bit more time to recoup between starts.
Yeah, I think we're going to see Smith Shawver sooner rather than later. And then the reports on Ian Anderson have been good too. I think the velocity's kind of fluctuated, but I mean, that's to be expected. The guy's coming back from Tommy John. I think I wrote this week, it's probably best not to count on those type of guys, and if hopefully or with a guy like Anderson, but if he pitches his way into the mix, that's a good veteran to do. And I imagine the Braves will want to get a look at him at some point, this season as well. But I think Smith Shawver could be a real X factor over these next couple of months because, as you said, I'm not sure how far they want to push Schwellenbach from an inning standpoint. We know how they've taken care of Chris Sale and Reynaldo Lopez as well, Charlie Morton. So I think there's a real good possibility for him to come up and have an impact.
There is also Waskari Noah beginning a rehab assignment as well. We'll see what he's able to do in the second half. He's been shut down for the better part of 3 months as well. Braves, meanwhile, begin their second half of play with a 6-game homestand. They welcome the St. Louis Cardinals to Truist Park on Friday to begin a 3-game weekend series. Then the Cincinnati Reds come to town to start next week. After that, Chris, a road trip for 4 against the New York Mets, 3 against the Milwaukee Brewers. I would categorize this as a pretty tough stretch coming out of the break. Pretty big test for the Braves because, of course, it leads up to the trade deadline. All of these are teams trying to get to October. The Brewers have control of the Central. The Cards, the Reds, the Mets, they all have to figure out what they need and where they stand when it comes to a rather crowded NL wildcard race that has the Atlanta Braves sitting at the very top.
Yeah, and I mean, I was looking at that. The Reds I think they're sub 500, but I was looking at the run differential today, and it's the best of anybody other than Atlanta that's currently got a wild card spot. So that's somebody you can't discount. So all these games are important, and they're going to be that way for the next 2 months. I still think the Braves can make this a division race if they get their offense going. But the wild card's going to be crazy too, as especially as the deadline comes and goes, and some teams sell and some teams buy, because I think it could be. I mean, there's so many teams that are still in it right now. It's going to be exciting.
It certainly will be. The Braves will throw Spencer Schwellenbach at St. Louis in Game 1. He's going to face Sonny Gray. Then it's Charlie Morton and Max Fried in Games 2 and 3, respectively. Some extra rest, as we've often discussed, for Chris Sale and Reynaldo Lopez coming out of the All-Star break. Lopez, though, able to pitch in his first All-Star game. Congrats to him. He looked very good in doing so. Both those guys, though, have already exceeded their innings totals from 2023. Lopez has thrown the most innings in a season since 2019. I guess we could say the same thing for Chris Sale and the 2018 season, but obviously different roads for these two guys to get here. But seems like a good call to take fuller advantage of the break in resetting and giving them more rest. Last month, the Braves dropped 2 out of 3 to the Cardinals up at Busch Stadium. They'd no doubt like to take care of business, Chris, and set the tone coming out of the break with a series victory at Truist Park beginning on Friday.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the name of the game now at this point. I mean, you just got to start checking off some wins, keep winning series. I thought it was big that they got that series win in San Diego before the break.
Yep.
You want to come out and keep that momentum up. St. Louis already took 2 of 3 from them, so it's, it's kind of important to go, and they're in the wild card chase too.
Yep.
So it's kind of important series, to try for tiebreakers and everything else. So, again, I think the break did 'em is gonna do them some, good, and, hopefully that with that offense just starts to find a rhythm a little bit.
Then we've seen the Braves have some pretty interesting second halves in the time that we've been talking about the Braves, Chris. And of course, historically speaking, nothing wrong with a good pennant race, good stretch drive. And the Braves are going to try to line themselves up for one of those, beginning with this homestand that starts against the Cardinals this weekend. That brings us to the end of another episode of BPTV. Hit that subscribe button right here on the Battery Power YouTube channel. Turn on those notifications to get an alert every time we drop a new episode. Thank you as always for riding along with us. For Chris Willis, I'm Grant McCauley. We'll catch you next time. And until then, so long, Braves country.